I did my famous entry again. How'd that look? Oh boy, I got to work on that. Hey, everybody. Here we go. We're a minute or two behind the 1 o'clock hour Eastern time, but we're ready to roll in just a second with my very special guest, my old pal, Steve Gorman. Thanks for tuning in to Live from my drum room. This is episode number 23. And as I said, my guest, of course, my old friend, the one and only Steve Gorman. I want to take a second. We're going to talk about this book during the next hour or so. If you haven't read this book, I highly, highly recommend it. Looking good. Hey, Carolyn and Carl Sterling and everybody that's watching. Thanks for tuning in, all you guys. Los, of course. I'd be really disappointed if you weren't here, Los. So thanks. And Carolyn, always nice to see you. So anyway, Steve wrote this book. I want to say it was released in 2020, might have been late 2019. I read it last year, 2020. If you don't know who Steve Gorman is, he is the drummer and founding member of the Black Crowes, a band that was and still is very near and dear to my heart. And this is an amazing book. Steve's an amazing guy. What can I say? Besides being a talented drummer and everything that he does, basically, he's successful in. But this is a fabulous book. And I had no doubt it would be a great book because he's a great writer, very smart man. But quickly, I just want to make a couple of quick announcements. Tell you that as of this morning, last week I talked about hitting 400 subscribers on YouTube. I'm up to 448 as of this morning, 448. That's 2 4s and an 8. Pretty amazing to think that I was, in just a week, I've grown by 48 more subscribers. How many more subscribers I can get, I don't know. I can't imagine there's that many more people that are on YouTube that I could get, but I'm hoping to maybe hit 450 before, it starts to sort of, peak at 450 before it starts to decline. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my Steve White. And Steve White will be here with me next week, by the way. And it's pretty cool because I'll just say there's a little history between Steve White and Steve Gorman. Steve, I know, will remember this, both Steves, that Steve White was subbing for his brother Alan in Oasis about maybe 20 years ago. And they were on a double bill with the Black Crowes, Oasis and the Black Crowes. And I had a great hang with Steve White here in Boston. And I didn't know Steve well at the time. And he was soon to come over to Zildjian. So anyway, it's great that we have Steve Gorman today and Steve White next Saturday. So tune in for that. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say at the moment. I'm going to bring my friend Steve Gorman on in just a minute. And 20 years ago, exactly. Yeah, that's what I thought, Steve. I think it was the summer that I got married, which was 2001, 20 years ago. Wow. My wife's still with me. God bless her, man. All right. Anyway, I did a little decorating this week. Actually, this morning, I kind of spruced things up a little bit, rearranged some drum sets yesterday. You might notice that. I've got my Midnight Blue Pearl kit in here with me set up. Can't really see it. And I've got my Black Diamond Pearl kit right there behind me. So, and a Ludwig kit way off in the background there. I don't know if you can see it. If I move that way, maybe. That's chairs. There we go. That's my Ludwig bowling ball, 69 Ludwig bowling ball kit. All right. Anyway, we'll talk about that another time. So without further ado, everyone, please give a big hand for my pal, Steve Gorman. And here he comes.
Jonathan.
Good afternoon, my friend.
Have you got me? Am I here? On you. You're still not there.
I'm still don't
here.
Have me. What kind of a lame ass show am I running here, for crying out loud?
You're not hearing me at all.
I'm hearing you now.
Oh, well then we're up and running.
We're up and running. I took my earpods out and I'm using the speaker in my trusty Mac, and just like that, I'm good to go. So
I sound best with lower fi quality audio wear. Like the more complicated you make things, you're gonna just get all the worst parts of that lustrous timbre that everyone's enjoying
but
now. So
that's the thing. You have that radio voice, and it would sound and great in these, but
the cheaper the speaker, the better it sounds. Trust me when I say that. I've experienced all manner of technological breakdown, John. I know of what I speak.
Oh, too funny. Thanks for doing this, buddy. And I'm sorry about that minute or so of snafu, but
It's quite all right. I got to watch you panic, and that's always a treat.
It's just like old times.
It's just like old times.
How many times have you made me panic in 31 years? You know, I mean,
boy, I don't know. But more than I should have. I'm sure. I filled the quota, and I kept it. I kept that number up as high as I could over the years.
Yeah, you did. Always in good fun, and always a lot of fun. So
31 years this summer. My gosh,
I know.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Well, I thought about it this morning. I was just thinking about seeing you, and I'm thinking 1990.
Yeah,
31 years. Wow. And for anybody who doesn't know, yesterday, Steve and his wife, Rosemary, celebrated 27 years of marital bliss. And that's, congratulations on that.
Thank you, sir.
Fantastic.
That is a startling number when I think back to where our heads were in 1994. I think we were both 28, and now it's been 27 years together. That's kind of crazy how that works.
Wow. I hadn't even thought of that. You're right. Wow.
Yeah. Marital bliss for a healthy percentage of the time.
Yeah.
And then my wife looking at me for the rest of that percentage of the time and going, really that I think this one through. But I'm happy to say that I'm still very lucky when it comes to life. So all is well on the home front.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know her very well, but I think I know her pretty well. And she's obviously she's a great woman and a really solid woman and a great mate for you. And you guys are a great team. That's what it takes, you know?
That is exactly what it takes. Go figure. Teamwork, John, it's kind of a big deal, no matter what the endeavor.
I'm learning it, man. This past year has made everybody a team player, I think.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
If nothing else, the people who haven't figured that out, we can all admit freely that they're sociopaths now. So that's good. There's always an upside.
Right. Exactly. And so you heard me say Steve White is watching. I don't know if you're watching on Facebook, but we have a whole bunch of folks watching, and Jeremy Stacy is watching, and Dave Maddox.
Jeremy Stacy, or as I call him, the talented Stacy brother. Good. That's great.
I'm sure his brother appreciates that.
I'm sure he does. And Steve White, boy, that's like four drummers right there in those two guys.
I know. And then you add Dave Maddox, and it makes it maybe
it makes me want to get off this thing right now, because I feel like, oh my God, that's treasured company for real. Very, very sincerely.
Great guys. Great guy. Steve White will be on with me next week. Dave Maddox was on a couple of weeks ago, and Jeremy Stacy, I haven't told you this yet, asked you yet, but you will be on in the near future, Jeremy. In fact, I was thinking, not to digress too much, but I was thinking it could be cool to have Jeremy and Pat Mostolato and Gavin Harrison, the King Crimson drummers on, but that's another time. So that's another conversation. Anyway,
the answer to the question, how far can you go slinging cymbals for a living, is pretty far. Pretty far. Look at the guest list. My God.
I know. And just the fact that you and all these guys like answer my emails or text messages is a feat unto itself. That surprises me every day, you know,
well, it's you know, when you're not around and we're all together and your name comes up, there's always that pause, and it's like, John, well, you know, it's always been that thing of, we got to be nice to John. I mean, my God, you know, if we turn our backs on him, what's left?
And
I,
you know
I
what?
don't even know where I'm going with that, John. You know everybody. You're the most beloved man in any sector of the music business. You know this.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you, Steve. That's very kind of you to say that.
So, well, it's very true. Now, what are we here to do? We're going to break down this Senate bill they just passed, or what's
Yeah,
actually happening here? Okay.
I saw that. It just went through breaking news, 1.9 trillion.
$1.9 trillion.
You buy a lot of vintage drums with that much
Yeah.
money.
Okay. So okay, we got that out of the way. What else, man?
Love to talk about this for a few minutes if you don't mind.
We can do that. We can
And
do that.
it was released. I mean, it's a minor detail. I said earlier, like setting it up, that was it released in 2020 or was it late 2019?
It came out in the fall of 2019.
2019. Okay, that's right. Yeah.
You remember you got up early and ran to the bookstore with all your friends. Yeah.
Yep.
That
I
day.
did. I waited in line. And it was the last one. And it just so happened that it was signed by you.
Oh, look at that.
And I did actually, I don't know if you remember, I did buy one. I bought a copy and then you said, no, I'm going to send you one. And which was very kind. And I think I gave the copy that I bought from Amazon to Jim McGathy, our old friend, Jim McGathy, who I happened
Very nice.
Yeah. And I thought, pay it forward because Jim was about to buy one, but hopefully he still bought one.
It's quite all right. I'm not sweating the details here, baby.
Okay.
I do remember when a guy at the publishing house said, I said, well, what are book sales? What's a good sale? Like, what are the numbers these days? And he goes, well, kind of like records, it's not like what it once was. I said, yeah, but what do you do? And he said, at some point he goes, well, look, just know this, for every book that's sold, like 5 or 6 or even 10 people are going to read it. And I was like, wait, really? And then it's amazing how many people said to me over the last year and a half, like, oh, I finally well, my brother had it and then he gave it to his wife and then she gave it to the neighbor. And I finally got it. I'm like, that's really how that works. And it's fine with me. I'm thrilled. The more people that read it, the merrier. I'm not chasing beans here, but it's a fascinating, and I thought about it like, oh yeah, that's what I do. My wife buys a book and then I wait and then a friend says, oh, I'm reading this book. And I'm always like, yeah, well, when you're done, throw it my way. And then, now I'm on the other side going, oh man, this is payback. I've been borrowing books my whole life.
I didn't think of it that way, but you're right. I would have thought you'd say, wait a minute, what? You need to buy your own copy, but no.
It's really, there's nothing I would sweat less. It's kind of like, on the musical side, the first time the Black Crowes ever had a conference call with their manager and Pete said, guys, I want to talk to you about, well, there's this thing you're going to hear about. It's called Napster. I remember that phone call.
Wow.
And him explaining it to us and none of us really getting it at all. But the only thing we figured was, well, I remember having the realization that, so no one's ever going to buy our old records anymore. Okay. Well, that kind of sucks, but
yeah,
we never, or at least I certainly never put too much thought into things like that I have. I already had no control over what the record company did. Why would I, you can't control any of it. I'm not going to lose sleep on that stuff.
That's what's so great about this book too. And I had meant to sort of brush up a little bit before today, which I didn't do, but I remember it well enough from reading it that there's so many great nuggets in it about just the dealings with the record company, stuff that, we've been friends a long time and you would share things that you could share with me in those days. And obviously you couldn't share everything, but there's I think I told you this at the time everybody watching at home, I was like texting Steve while I was reading it, like, and I get to a point and I'd go like, holy shit, I can't fucking believe, and you're like, believe it, baby, or whatever, like a one sentence reply, like, oh yeah. But if you haven't read this book, you have to read it. It's amazing. It's so uplifting. No, no,
it's a laugh riot. Go ahead and say it, John.
It's a laugh riot.
I actually think it is a laugh riot. But I guess that's because I look at all bands. I think every band is a clown car. The best bands ever, the internal dynamics are always silly. It's just the inherent nature of a bunch of guys that want to get together and rock together. You're going to have a lot of drama. You're going to have a lot of miscommunication. You're going to have a lot of issues under the best of circumstances. And some of it's just as simple as the reality of your life once you're touring nonstop, which is you never get away. It's as simple as you never get away from each other. Local bands don't fight You know what I mean?
Right.
You play a gig and then you go back to your old job, you go back to your day job, and then you rehearse in a week, and whatever pissed you off, it's over. You
Right.
know, it's at least that was our, that was the way it was with us. I mean, until our first record came out, we were never all together. We never got sick of each other because we were never around each other enough to do that. And sometimes it's just that. I mean, it's every band's experience is just that simple. People that get along great, 6-8 weeks in a van, then tell me how well you get along. It's just life.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. That's what makes.
And now to that point, I also will add that we had a little extra mustard in the makeup of the band, if you will. There was always some tension, and there's always this and that. But I mean, everybody, as far as we knew, was all on the same page. So, we had a hell of a run, complete with a lot of moments veering in and out of various ditches, like just about every band.
Yeah. 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 And it was just interesting. And, and again, I think if anybody who followed the band probably had an idea of some of these ups and downs, but just the sort of ups and downs of some thing happening internally amongst the guys in the band. And then all of a sudden you're on tour with Jimmy Page, and like, things just couldn't be brighter. Like, things are just,
right.
You guys are, it's like everybody's just got this renewed energy and focus and excitement, and I could totally see that, like, it's freaking Jimmy Page, and I remember when you guys did those dates with the Stones, you told me, and that was 94, I think, right? Or
95.
95. Okay. 95. And I remember at that time there was some, leading up to that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but leading up to that point there was some internal strife, and then you guys went out and did some dates with the Stones, and I remember you saying to me, we just kind of looked at each other and said, look at these guys. Like, if we have a legacy, we could build on that legacy. We could be not to say that you'd be the Rolling Stones, but you saw the potential for what your future could be. Yeah.
We were, and I say we, I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody. We were never, we would lose perspective with the best of them. You know what I mean? Real fast. We'd get on the road, and I do think part of that comes from when a band is founded by two brothers when they're still in high school and they never get away from each other. There's an inherent sense of, a big decision we have to make about next tour is still somehow connected to the time you left me after gym class and didn't give me a ride home. I mean, and again, that's something else that any two brothers that work together in a band, or any two sisters or any siblings, it's incredibly difficult to separate lifelong back and forth from the band, and so we dealt with a lot of that, but everybody had their own struggles with trying to maintain perspective, like, it shouldn't take seeing the Rolling Stones up close to realize, like, oh wait, we've actually accomplished something pretty great, and it's pretty special, and we should try to hang on to it. Like, it shouldn't take that, but it did. And like I said, I'm as guilty as anybody. I think it's just there's, for everything great that happens to a band, to an artist, to anybody who, your quote unquote dreams come true. Every step you take forward is another, is every opportunity is also an opportunity to step away from a natural evolution or growth, emotional or spiritual or intellectual growth as well. You find yourself being rewarded for repetitive actions. It's real simply, like, hey, that set list was great, play the same set tomorrow night. That's as old as the hills. Like, you go promote the record, you do, and your whole life turns into, it's just, you're reliving the same day in a different city. And something just that simple, I think it really does have an impact on everybody's ability to step away from that and actually grow up. That summer of 95, shortly after that Stones tour, I turned 30. And I remember very clearly thinking, like, holy shit, I'm 30 years old. And I would have friends from college, or my older siblings, or people would come to shows all the time. And I would have conversations with them where, they're looking at us like any friends do. They come to a gig and that's their big night out, like, oh man, you guys are great, we're rocking, and so everybody you see is in a great mood, always. Like, after a few years of that, you kind of have to remind yourself, not everyone's in a great mood all the time. It's not that I'm a great guy. They're just having a night out drinking free beer. Like, that's why they're so excited. They got backstage passes. It's got nothing to do with, we're making their life better for 6 hours,
Yeah.
and then you have conversations, and then it would dawn on me like, wow, everybody's taking very different types of lumps, and everybody's maturing at a different level than we are. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's different. You have to at least acknowledge, like, this is a strange little landscape we're in. And I don't know. I just always was. And I think that part of it is having 7 older siblings. I think I was always a little bit more aware of just how unique our world was, and how it wasn't in the stars. It wasn't predestined for us to have this run. Like, it's because we went out and worked hard and had some lucky breaks.
Yeah.
Just like anybody else. Because and there was always a sense, there's a lot in the book that, to me, when I read it, it's all just, that's a huge part of it. Like, just being the one guy in the band who's the youngest of a huge family. I just had many, many people that I spent my entire life in a house with, and I watched their paths, and they're all doing great things and successful in very different pursuits. And everybody's, all 8 of us did very different things. And everybody did really well, but everybody worked hard. And, I just had that kind of perspective. And the other guys in the band initially were all, this all they knew in a certain way, for their families anyway. No one had older siblings.
Yeah.
And I always think it saved me in a very real way.
Yeah, no, I recognize that too, the influence that your older siblings had on you too, the closeness of all you guys. I've met some of your siblings at shows, and
yeah.
And I know that's a huge part of your development, really, and just your ability to deal with things, and, like you say, your perspective and how you look at things. And
yeah, I think, growing up as the youngest in that family. Sorry, there is you wait in line your whole life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, I got a jacket in 4th grade, and it was new, and it was the first piece of clothing that I ever liked, that B wasn't someone else's first, also named Gorman. I mean, I remember, like, I wore it to school, like, yes, sir. It was like a windbreaker, but it was a fake Fonzie leather jacket, but it was just a little nylon windbreaker. And that was the coolest thing in the world to me, man. I was on cloud 9. And I think that just, it's just there's no way to separate my experience from my family from what I then brought to the band, both strengths and weaknesses, like everybody.
Yeah.
But they were certainly very unique within the context of my band.
Talking about that, so, and I know I've bugged you about this for as long as I've known you, but I think your story as a drummer is just, it's pretty fascinating, in that you started so late in life compared to, like, a lot of drummers started. And so you were in college, really, basically, when you.
Yeah, the first time, I mean, well, when I was in 4th grade, still living in Severna Park, Maryland, I joined the school band in percussion. And so I got a snare drum and a set of bells, like a little glockenspiel type thing. And I had to learn how to play the Yellow Rose of Texas on the bells. And I was like, I'm not here for the bells, man. I want to rock. And when I joined up, in my maniacal own mind as a 9-year-old, I pictured a drum kit. Like, I thought I was going to rock a kit. Guy gave me a little Ludwig snare drum in a big plastic case and said, "Here you go." And I was like, "What the hell is this?" So I think, like a lot of young drummers in their own head, it was quite a disappointment to realize I was supposed to learn rudiments and practice, like, on a piece of rubber, and learn how to read rudiments. That did not last long at all. In fact, I was asked to leave the band because I never once took the bells out and tried to learn a song on them. I was like, well, I'll do the snare drum stuff, but I'm not touching those bells. So, that was problematic. And, like, it's funny because I was told I was no longer in the band, but my parents had bought this stuff for me. So every Friday I still took it to school. Like, I never even told them I wasn't in the band. One of the benefits of being the 8th kid right there, they're too tired to check up on you. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, great, looks good. Steve's got a hobby. They weren't asking questions. They were just trying to get everybody out of the house. So, but so that didn't last. When I was the summer after 4th grade, we moved to Kentucky. I got there and I had a record player and a bunch of albums, and I was already really obsessed with records and music. But I didn't pursue drumming at all anymore. I mentioned it a couple times, like, "Hey, I really want to drum," and it was never taken seriously. I got summer jobs like a lot of kids. I could have easily made a plan and saved up and bought a kit, but I think I was just at a place. This is like, mid to late 70s. I'm in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. I'm obsessing over new bands and records, and always air drumming and playing along to records. I'd go down and I'd put on Wings Over America or a Beatles record or an Earth, Wind and Fire record or a Devo record, whatever.
Or the Bee Gees.
Absolutely a Bee Gees record.
Yeah.
Whatever I was listening to at the time. And I would sit there and I would air drum along, and I knew what I was doing. Like I knew enough to know what you're supposed to be doing. Like my right foot's that thing, and here's the toms. I mean, I was always watching drummers. And along the way, at some point, I think I just realized there was no path to, like, if I buy a drum kit, then what? None of my friends play music. None of my friends care about the bands I like. I just didn't have this sense of, oh, this will turn into something. I was in this really small town. When I got to college, to just bring you up to speed, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go to college. I'll find some people there to play me. Surely there'll be some dudes there to be in a band with.
Yeah.
But the main problem for me was I still hadn't played drums yet. All of a sudden I'm in this position, like along the way, when I should have been in the basement learning how to play, I was still just thinking about how cool it would be to be in a band. So I did approach it as, I'm not a drummer. I'm a dude in a band who knows how to play drums. Maybe, like, that was kind of where my thing was coming from. So my freshman year, I met a kid with a drum kit. Right away there was a guy on campus, and I said, let me take a whack at that thing. Before I'd sat at a kit a couple of times in high school. I'd come across drum kits and sat behind them, but first time I ever sat down and really played for 10 straight minutes was my freshman year of college. And right away I was like, man, I knew I could do that. Like, I can do that. I'm playing. Like, this sounds like I know what I'm doing. I had no stamina, and I had no, sense of anything other than how to play a straight beat, really. And so New Year's Eve of 1983, my freshman year of college, my older brother and some friends, they had a band for years. It was like a performance art piece. They never played a gig. Yeah. They would put flyers up and announce a show, and then they would put up flyers canceling the show. It was just a thing they did to amuse themselves. But one of them could play guitar, and then they found a bass player, and suddenly I was the drummer. Like, perfect. He's played for 9 minutes. Let's have a show. We played a New Year's Eve party, and it was just in a house in Nashville, Tennessee. So New Year's Eve, 83 to 84, we learned maybe a dozen songs and played them all 3 times. Beatles songs and Ramones songs, and Brand New Cadillac by the Clash version, or real simple stuff. Every song was the same beat, just sped up or slowed down. But just doing that, like a party in front of a bunch of drunk friends, I mean, that really did. That was it. Like, I woke up on New Year's Day saying, guys, let's be a real band now. Come on. And to my chagrin, the guys looked at me and went, yeah, go ahead. We're all about to graduate. We have lives to live, And so that I spent the next 2 years looking for the right people, like trying to find my band, and it just never happened. I was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I had some good friends that loved music, but no one that played, no one that was interested in playing. And lo and behold, I end up as a senior in college, kind of panicking, like, this is not ever going to happen. Damn, I thought surely something was going to break. And I did nothing to make it happen. Literally, I look back and I'm like, I was just sitting around, like, waiting for the phone to ring. And then, honest to God, one day the phone rang. And it was an old friend of mine. And he said, this part's in the book. An old buddy said, man, I'm dropping out of school, and he's playing guitar and he's writing songs. He goes, you're playing drums, right? And I was like, oh yeah, all the time. And that was it. I was just like the right guy at the right time. And it's funny because he called my dorm room, but no answering machine. There's no telling how many calls you miss in college. And if I hadn't answered, he very clearly could have called someone else that he knew who was a drummer. Like, it's one of those, I happened to be in my room when he called. And, that's literally, he said, do you want to start a band with me? And I said, yeah, I mean, without hesitation. And he said, he was going to school at Hampshire up in, in Massachusetts, Hampshire College.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to move to Boston. It's a great scene. Let's start a band. And I said, done. Like, no question. Cool. And then, so for about a month, I was in a band in Boston, a city I'd never been there. And I was able to tell people, I'm in a band. Yeah, we're in Boston. I'm going to head up there after Christmas. And then, around Thanksgiving, he called and said, man, it's too cold up here. Let's go back to Atlanta, because that's where he was from. I said, hey, that works. Let's go. I mean, it was just so random to me. I didn't give a shit where it was going to be. I just said, all right. And, saved up some money, got a couple of weird jobs, and worked at this blue jean distribution warehouse factory gig for a little while, saved up some money and got a bus to Atlanta in February of '87. And, so like I had literally spent at that point in time sitting behind a drum kit without a question, less than 24 hours cumulatively in my life. But most of those hours were spent playing in front of people, like playing at parties, because we had picked up a few more over the few years, never rehearsed. We just showed up. And like I said, I had a couple of good beats by that point, just sped them up or slowed them down. And I was ready. But I did spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about drumming in a very real way, like thinking about what drummers do and what drummers bring to a band, or what I got my whole mindset about drumming in those years, just going to see bands, listening to records over and over, and realizing what moves me and the drumming that just sticks to me, almost like, in my DNA. It's all these drummers that just had a real natural bounce to their playing. They were swinging. There's some great fills, but that wasn't the point. It's like, just serve the song, all these things that people talk about. I didn't have the language to describe it, but I knew what moved me, and I knew what I felt a drummer was supposed to do. And so when I got to Atlanta and started playing, I at least started from a place of, my job is just to not mess up. Like I got to hold the line.
Yeah.
And if I get from A to B in a reasonable sense, if the tempo doesn't move too much, then everybody else is going to be okay. I'm providing the ground, literally. Like, I'm planet Earth. Everyone else is going to jump on top of me. And so, and I also knew I was behind the curve. I knew I was getting a late start. So I didn't have time to go figure out how to play like Keith Moon and Neil Peart. It was like, I don't have time to learn fills. I just got to deliver. I'm just here to deliver the milk, lady. Like, I'm just going to drop this on the porch, put it in your cereal. I'll see you tomorrow. It was very, very, it was both incredibly simple. And as we've all learned, I was also, my greatest strength was also my greatest weakness. I couldn't play all that stuff, but I also knew I shouldn't play all that stuff. I acted like I had everything in the bag and I had great taste. And it was that weird line of, this guy is so tasteful and this guy doesn't know how to do anything. It's a fine line to walk in the early days of a local musician, but it worked out.
That's funny. Well, I'll just say, I'm really impressed that at that young age, you knew. I mean, that's something that it takes a lot of drummers a long time to understand what their real job is. Like, but you did know that. I mean, you did.
Well, if I'd had a kit as in high school and I was in my basement, I don't know that I would have cared to understand that, because I would have figured out how cool it is to play fills and do drum solos. And, I just, every time I was ever sitting at a drum kit, there was a guy next to me holding a guitar. Like, I had never played by myself, except for literally for a handful of minutes over the years. And so it was just, all I ever played was songs. And again, it's a great strength and it's a great weakness. I made sure to act like I knew what I was doing. And, you can get pretty far on charm and you can get pretty far on natural ability, and then you learn it as you go. And then you look up one day and you go, hey, I pulled that off right on.
Yeah. It's like the classic move we all do when you make a mistake and you play it again a second time.
Just magnify that to an entire lifestyle, John. That's what we're talking about.
Oh man, too much, and too modest, because you definitely got more going on, and that's for sure.
Hey, make no mistake. I see, that's the thing too. Like, my brain knew what I was doing in terms of walking that fine line, but I would never lacked for confidence. I mean, I definitely noticed early on when I got to Atlanta, and suddenly every band I see is not my competition, but all of a sudden I'm in that world. Like, I got to Atlanta, like I said, I got to Atlanta, I was already in a band. I didn't even own a drum kit. I had to go buy a kit. And I go to Rhythm City and I buy this Pearl Export kit, and I spend I had $700 to my name and I spent $699.99 on a kit. That's true
Right.
story. Like I
I
left
know.
with a penny and I was like, okay, I better make this work because I got to go get a job and find some gigs. And, but but even then, it's like when I played my first ever club gig, it was with the band that I initially started. It was called Marry My Hope.
Mm.
And we opened for Mr. Crow's Garden, which eventually became the Black Crows. So it was this club in Atlanta called the Dugout, and I'd been seeing bands there for a few months, and it was finally our first show. This new band, first gig. It's Friday night. It's an all ages club, and it's literally sold out. There's 600 people there,
Wow.
or 500, whatever it held. It was packed, and I was caught. I couldn't catch my breath for the first song, but it felt a lot like when I played sports. There's certain games you get too hyped up for. You get too excited to play the crosstown rival and you spend the first quarter trying to catch your breath.
Yeah.
And then once you're sweating and once you're into it, you're just going. And it was, literally, I mean, I remember a lot about that very specific gig. I mean, I can see it and I can feel it still. It's from 1987. And by the time the gig ended, it was just like a ball game. Like by the time we got to the end of that set, I was just in charge. I was like playing very aggressively and with great confidence, because it's like you just got to be in the moment. And it's like, and I had already been watching drummers, and I'd already been picking up drummers in the local scene. There would be a hesitance. They'd come out of a fill and they just didn't have confidence. They just weren't attacking the rim, like, to put everything in basketball terms like I do. And I was like, and I would sit there and in my mental notes, like I'd done my whole life, I was like, well, I might fuck this up, but I'm not going to fuck it up because I get scared. Like, I'm going to find out where the one is, and I might be wrong, but no one's going to wonder where I think it is. Like I'm running this shit, and it was just it was just sort of a jock mentality, but it was like, I got this, man, and by the time that that band Marry My Hope, with me in the band, we played all of three shows, and then I switched bands. Right. And I can remember the third show we played, which turned out to be my last one, like going into that gig like I'd already been on tour for a year. Like I just felt so, and it wasn't that I was great, but I had just already learned enough to know, like, okay, well, I know what not to do. Like I absolutely know what not to do. And you're on your way if you figure that out. And I felt like I knew that right away.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can totally see that too, that, and knowing you that, and it's not ego or anything like that. It's just you're comfortable in your own skin, and you were.
No, I mean, drumming is, I've always seen drumming as such an expression of personality. You know what I mean? It's just my favorite drummers anyway. And any great drummer is just, you're putting yourself, you're holding sticks, and those things are translating with your feet into who you are as a person in a lot of ways. When I'm watching guys in bands, obviously session drumming's a different world, and different gigs are different gigs, but the drummers that I always loved, my favorite guys who were all in bands, like it was all about the band, you just felt something about that person listening to them. And so that was a part of it too. And a lot of this does go back to my family. Like I knew very well who I was. And this is not kicking dirt at all. A lot of guys start bands at 18 and 19 years old because they're trying to figure out who they are. And they did spend their high school years locked away in the basement, learning how to play that instrument and try to pour their heart and soul into it. I didn't have any of that, man. I was out playing sports and running around and listening to records and going to see bands, but I didn't question who I was. And granted, a lot of times you learn, well, I didn't know that about myself. I mean, there's a lot of growth that still I needed in front of me. But at 21, 22, and 23, I was just playing like me. I was like, well, it can't be, it's my band. I mean, we're doing this together. So if I do it, it's right. I had that sort of ability. Like I wasn't comparing myself to other drummers. I was just making sure I was doing what felt right to me. And that's unusual. I mean, for a local band scene, a lot of guys, like I said, there were drummers I'd watch them play and I'd be like, man, that guy could play circles around me. and he's thinking about everything he does, and I didn't have that problem.
And so who were your early, I mean, I have an idea of who your early influences were, but like who were some, like when you were younger and then
Oh,
when you
it's
really got
well,
into,
Ringo is job one. I mean, just I got two Bee Gees records when I was 5, and I loved them, and I just listened to them obsessively. I got 2 years on, and then that first Best of Bee Gees album, the gold colored one.
yeah.
And I was just loved the songs. I would just sit there and listen and listen and listen. And one of my older brothers was just losing his mind because, why is Steven listening to the Bee Gees again? It was like and he came down, my brother Tom, he lives in Denver and he's a guitarist. He was the other musician in the family. And he came into the room downstairs. We called it the pool room because there was a pool table there, but that's where the record player was. He comes into the pool room and he has Meet the Beatles, Help, and Rubber Soul. And he goes, here, he just take these and stop playing the Bee Gees. Like it was just classic, just older brother losing his mind, having to hear Lonely Days for the 900th time that day. and I put on Help first. And I just was like, and I had heard the Beatles and I'd heard songs on the radio. This is in late 70, so I mean, obviously I'm aware as a 5-year-old kid. I put on Help. And when Ticket to Ride came on, I just started air drumming. I started playing along to it. I just was like, oh my God, what is that? And it is as clear a memory and a sense, I can feel it still so clearly. Just this thing grabbing me. And I didn't even know I invented air drumming as far as I know, because I'd never seen anyone else do it. And I was just flailing my arms. And it was just that beat of Ticket to Ride. And that was it. I mean, that was it. And from that day, I just wanted to be a drummer. I just felt like I was a drummer. I mean, a big part of my ability to pick it up so quickly it wasn't because I wanted to be a drummer. It's because I was always a drummer that just hadn't done it yet.
Yeah.
And that goes back to when I was 5 years old, honestly. And so, those 3 albums, Meet the Beatles, and, just think about some of you can still put on Meet the Beatles and go, man, that sucker is swinging like crazy back there, man. You listen to those early tracks.
Yeah.
And by the time they're doing Help, a song like Ticket to Ride, or even something like, well, anything on those records. And then I started immediately expanding. And then I went up and I got Beatles 6, like American release, like with 8 Days a Week in Kansas City. And, I just started going through my brother's other records. And then I started buying my own. And I mean, by the time I was like 9, I had personally gotten my own entire Beatles collection. Like if I had $3 extra, I was going to buy a Beatles album. I'd save up my 25-cent allowance or whatever and steal 25 cents from Dave or Doug. And all of a sudden I got enough for another record. And it was just that. So Ringo, for the first, until I was 10 or 11, it was just stamped on my brain, Ringo's drumming, and from that's a pretty good place to start, because he was obviously, there was so much feel, and it was all swing with him and all feel and all bounce. But they were, the Beatles really, they were playing like country songs, and they played their version of blues songs, and they played all these things. And, by the time I'm 7 and I'm diving into the White Album, I'm just like, what the hell's happening here? And and then, getting into Revolver and listening to She Said, She Said, and air drumming to that, it just gives you a headache right away. I'm like, what, so it was more than enough for my little brain to just keep digging into those records. And so I went right from the Beatles into, there was a solo Beatles run, but all of a sudden I was really into new wave and punk when that all started. I loved Clem Burke, just killed me, but I was really into Devo, and that first, the Are We Not Men album, the drumming on that record's absolutely insane. And so, and then I had a brother who was really into Earth, Wind and Fire. All of a sudden I started, once I opened everything up, and I still look back now on all the records I listened to at any stage of the game, there's none where I go, why did I listen to that? That drummer sucks. It's all great drummers. It's all, it's a big part of all of us. So just as a fan, it was all seeping in so much. And I just, and it's funny because I didn't listen to Led Zeppelin ever. I knew it, you can't get away from it, but I didn't sit down like with headphones and put on Led Zeppelin records until I bought that first kit. I was 21 years old. First time I put on Led Zeppelin 1 and listened start to finish, like you're supposed to. And And that was the next time I felt what I felt when I heard Ticket to Ride. Like, I just was like, oh, that's exactly what everything's supposed to sound and feel like. Like, it was like putting my foot into a shoe I'd been wearing for 10 years. It was like, oh, holy shit, how did I miss this? You know?
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's Ringo and Bonham are the two guys that I always just, it's to me, because it's just me. Those are just the guys that sound and feel like I think you're supposed to sound and feel more so than anybody else.
Yeah.
And there's a million great drummers. I rip off something from every drummer I ever see or hear, of course, because everybody does. But those are the two guys that are just the bread and butter of everything I ever tried to play.
Makes sense. And I can definitely hear both of those guys. And I can definitely hear a lot of John Bonham in your playing, you know, in terms of how you hit. You definitely hit with with a backbeat.
Well, and in the early days, how I hit was just it was always important to find the biggest sticks possible because I couldn't afford to break them. And I wasn't about to learn how not to break sticks. Like that would have, you know, again, I'd watch guys play a whole set with one pair of sticks and I'd be like, how do you not break those things? And I was the sloppiest striker in history. But, you know, but I always focused on what it felt like as opposed to what, you know, more so than what it sounded like. I didn't feel like I knew enough to know if my drums were adequately tuned or, you know, I'd get into conversations with drummers in the late 80s and they'd be talking about cymbals and I'd be like, yeah, that one's not cracked. You know, it's like that ride's pretty good, man. It doesn't have a crack yet. I'm gonna keep playing that. You know, it was very. I always knew what was worth paying attention to, and then I knew what I wasn't really. You know, the first time I went into a studio, I looked at the desk and all those knobs, and the first time, and I went, okay, I'm never gonna learn how this works. It's too. I don't have that side of the brain operational at all. I said to the producer, I go, do you know what every one of these knobs does? He goes, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. Then I don't need to know any of it.
Well, you know, talking about feel, I've told you this many times, I mean, all your records, but the first time I heard you play the first record, and it must've been hard to handle. Like, was that the first single from Shake Your Money?
It was the third. Jealous Again and Twice as Hard had come out in the winter and spring of 90. And then Hard to Handle came out that summer. When we met, Hard to Handle was the single.
I guess, yeah. And I guess I'd heard those. I certainly heard Jealous Again before that. But like, it's so funny hearing you talk about this stuff because I was completely looking at you from a whole different standpoint. I think I might've heard your story from somebody, maybe our friend, the late, beautiful Lissa Wales, who I know you knew. And she was, you know, and I know, she would take pictures of all the drummers. And I feel like we had a conversation about you and before I actually met you, but listening to your playing on on that first record, I thought you were this, like, you know, you have an incredible feel. And I just, you know, I thought you were somebody who'd been playing for a long time. And, but it just tells you how natural it all came to you. Is my point to all this, Steve, is it blows my mind to think that it was your first time in the studio really making that record. And it's just such a natural, organic feel that you have.
It wasn't easy. I mean, I was really intimidated going into that studio the first time. I'd never played to a click track. I'd never tried to do anything like that. And it took it took several days to get one track that was usable. I mean, and that wasn't all on me. I mean, the whole band wasn't good at playing together. And you know, I've always kind of prescribed to the notion of if you're not in over your head, you don't know how tall you are. You know, just in life. I mean, and I feel like when the Black Crowes went to make Shake Your Moneymaker, that we were all way in over our heads. Our bass player had just joined like that month. I think we had played one show with him before we went to make a record. Our guitarist had just been with us for 4 or 5 months, and we'd never played more than, I think when we made that record, we had one 4-night in a row run in our entire existence. Like, we had rarely ever played back-to-back nights. One time we did 4 in a row. But we were on such a steep learning curve in 87 and 88. Like, when we did 4 in a row, that 4th night, we were like, man, we're actually pretty good. You know, like all we needed was the chance to get in there. You know, we just needed our reps in the batting cage. And then but the truth is we didn't get those until the record was released and we were put onto an actual tour. We were always kind of playing catch up. When we got to the studio, we were all really stressed. We felt like this is our only shot we'll ever have. And we weren't thinking like selling records, we were thinking like making a good record. In that regard, we were like, this record has to be great because, we'll never get another chance unless it's great, unless we really come in. And we weren't, I think the way I describe myself, I think that's the way that Mr. Crow's Garden and then the Black Crows, as we all were kind of like that. Like, I mean, I used to say we're the worst band in Atlanta, but we're the best band in the world. I really believe that, like, yeah, we suck, but there's a lot of talent here. And all we got to do is figure out what to do with it. And luckily we had a producer who knew exactly how to guide us to play to our strengths. I mean, that record was absolutely everything we could have possibly done. Like it's the first time we ever truly outdid ourselves. And then we had to become the band that was good enough to go out and promote that record because we weren't, I mean, we got finished with the sessions. And the first time we ever listened to it sitting in a room, the mixed and mastered version, I mean, we just kept looking at each other going, holy shit, because we were very impressed with ourselves. We set a really high bar and we got there. But then it was a whole nother process 8 months later when it's released and we have to go be that band every night. That took a while.
Yeah, but you got there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, everybody, Chris was the same way as a singer. Like he's obviously great, but he hadn't done that before. Rich as a guitarist, like we were all at the same level, I think, developmentally. Yeah. We knew there was something between us. There was an obvious chemistry within the band. When Jeff joined and when Johnny joined, they added to it. They didn't detract we put the right pieces together and it was just a matter of figuring out how to make sense of it, but it was, so all the stuff I'm talking about, when I'm talking about me as a drummer and my mindset, I mean, the band was kind of the same way.
Yeah. Yep. It makes sense. Yeah. You guys were all kind of in that same,
I'm just thinking about the fact, like you said, like Steve White and Jeremy Stacy, these guys that I hold them in the highest regard. They're just phenomenal drummers. And they're also guys who were students of these instruments, and no one in the Black Crows was that way. Like we all had this very different, almost like a punk, we'll just figure it out when we get up there. I mean, we were really that band, like we would play shows in 1988. And right before we'd go on stage with our 8-song set list, Chris would go, hey, but let's do that one we did at practice last night. And I'd go, we didn't even come up with an arrangement. He goes, let's just figure it out. We had this bizarre notion that we could go up and improvise, and none of us knew how to play anything. It was just, we were improvising songs, not playing, not parts. It was just an arrangement. Just do the verse and the chorus twice, and then let's see what happens. And we would just go up there and fall on our faces, and I would see drummers, I would see musicians that were just, like I said, playing circles around us. But when you're talking about a rock and roll band, chemistry is ultimately the intangibles are what it's all about.
Yeah.
And so we were loaded with those without literally any of the patience and self discipline to have the tangibles lined up at all.
Yeah. I was just going to say, not to inject a personal anecdote, but one of my first bands, my first sort of real band, I had a bandmate who could be watching, Mike McKee, who was exactly that guy. And that we'd had a bunch of our own songs, and just as we're about to do the tune, he'd go, hey, let's do a reggae version of this. Let's do like, let's completely change. Like, are you, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a healthy mix of, in any band. There's the guy that comes up with the plan. Then there's the guy that can't possibly be expected to follow the plan. And then there's the people, then you've got the people that are just like this guy's the glue, and that guy's that guy's the flamethrower. I mean, in a perfect world, a band has a little bit of all these things. And we certainly did at that time. I mean, where the Black Crows went astray or ran afoul of our own strengths was just not everybody kind of forgetting how important everybody was. Like, respect is more important than love in a rock band. I mean, you've got to, there's a Venn diagram, and that center circle doesn't have to be equal sizes of everybody's contribution, but everybody's contribution has to matter as much as everybody else's. Like, you can't ask everybody to it's like in a 5-piece band. It's not like everybody has to have 20% of anything. but the percentage they do bring has to be acknowledged and respected by the others. And in that way, it is like a basketball team. The 5 best basketball players never end up on the same team for a good reason. They're not going to win a lot of games. And I look at rock bands the same way. I mean, the chemistry within great bands is always undeniable, and it's always something that manifests itself in successful bands. It's something that's in play 24 hours a day. It's not about when they're just holding their instruments. It's the life of a band. The great majority of time you're not playing music, and so it's the contributions everyone makes otherwise that really play a large part in whether a band's going to go anywhere or not.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I was just going to say that we met that summer of 1990. You guys were on tour with Aerosmith.
Mm-hmm.
Met you right here at good old the former Great Woods. And
remember how old Aerosmith was in 1990, and nobody could believe they could still do it 31 fucking years ago. It is funny to think. I mean, because I look back on that and all the bands, it was shocking. Like, they were in their early 40s and we were on that tour, and people were asking us every day, can you believe they're still doing it?
I know.
And of course my answer was no. God, they're ancient. We went out with Robert Plant. He was like 42, and we were saying like, God, he's really doing good for his age, isn't he? It's like so ridiculous.
I know. I think about that stuff too. I think when I'll see somebody on TV or something, and I'll go, wow, he was like a little older than my son is right now. And I thought that when I was a kid, I thought that was old, like
all of us, John, present company excluded, have aged. You have managed to stay the same. It's a fact. It's a joke everyone says, but it's true. I just want to, obviously I'm going to credit Kelly with that, but somehow you look exactly the same after all these years.
Thank you, Steve. I've definitely got a healthy amount of gray hair.
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure thing. You're just doing that so we feel good. I know it's not real.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind. But I was going to mention that 2 years later, when you guys were touring on the second record, 92, to me, it was, like the difference between, well, first of all, the first time I met you and the first time I saw you, you guys were, the opener, the support band. And then here you are as a headliner on your second record. And it was really you could see the band had, and I would attribute it to just the fact that in those 2 years, you guys worked your asses off with touring and
played a lot of shows.
Yeah, doing a lot of shows. And it really showed because you had this maturity, I guess is the best word, to come out as a band, and it's like you'd been doing it all along. Do you know what I mean? It was hard to believe just the last time I saw you, you guys were the new band, and here you were. Yeah.
Well, I think we did 350 shows for Shake Your Moneymaker, like actual gigs, not to mention all the promotional stuff you do in addition to that. And like I said, we hadn't done that as a local band. Like I see, I have a nephew who's in a band now called Illiterate Light. They're on Atlantic Records. They're phenomenal. Before they ever put out a piece of music, they'd played 300 shows themselves. They're just in their little Subaru driving around up and down the East Coast for years. We never did that. You know what I mean? Like, so when you first saw us on Aerosmith, we had done 2 tours in clubs, like 6-week tour with one band, a 4-week tour with another, 10-day run over in England. And all of a sudden we're in arenas with Aerosmith. So we were way in over our heads, like to go up and try to get 10,000 people to pay attention in a 40-minute set. But from the beginning to the end of that tour, we were like a different band. We were still really, the growth was spectacular. By the time that Shake Your Moneymaker tour ended, like well over a year after that, it was, we were way past the point of even thinking. We just walked on stage like it was just, we just hit that line. And so, I remember that was summer of 92. That would have been at the Orpheum in Boston. Those shows in particular were just were stomping. Like that was we were at that place where it was like, I mean, I've always said like the Black Crowes was, we weren't there's no best band, but to me, a great band, like you can compare REM and Metallica if you want to. It's kind of pointless. The reason they're both the greatest band in the world is because they're the best band that they can be. Like REM is as good as they did what REM was there to do. Metallica did what Metallica was there to do. They didn't let other things get in the way of where they were trying to go as a band. Like, they started together, they moved en masse, they did this thing day in and day out for all those years. And for a time, the Black Crowes, that's when I look back and say we were as good as anybody. It's that. I mean, you could look at the Black Crowes and not care for the sound that band made, but still you'd have to go, that's a fucking great band. I mean, and so by 92, I think we were definitely in that place, where it was just our worst night was a really good night. And again, my mindset always being, the guy, like as long as the floor is solid, like it was always trying to raise the level. Like, what's the worst this can be? You got to keep making sure it's a little better. It's like from the bottom up is how you build a great band.
Yeah.
You gotta have that safety, making sure that, that nothing happens when, you got, it's like a great goalie or whatever you want to say. There's something there where the worst case scenario, it's still a pretty fucking serious show. And we were certainly there by 92. That was job one in my mind. And the whole band was just, we were locked in. That was a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Locked in is a great way to describe it. A couple of quick questions I'm going to throw by you, Steve, that some folks have been putting in here. My friend Anthony Cusina, who joins me every week, he's asking, what future dreams do you have for yourself musically speaking?
Well, my band Trigger Hippie was, we put a record out in 2019, right? Like a month after I put this book out. And we had just gotten started really getting out and hitting the road when the world locked down. So first and foremost, I just want to get Trigger Hippie back playing shows. We have a ton of songs that we're going to have to record at some point. I don't know whenever we're going to release new music, but that's my musical focus. I love that. Great. The record we put out, Full Circle and Then Some, I love it. We're really proud of it. And we would have been playing all last year had things gone to plan. And so we're just now seeing like offers for outdoor shows for the summer. We'll get a few things together, but we have yet to have that big powwow where we actually lay out a plan, just because it's too early to know what we can actually do when. But I mean that's just the one thing I focus on. I hear from people, there's always things out there in the weeds like this. Hey, would you be interested in doing this if this and this all happen? I get a lot of those calls, like, like, hey, if these 9 dominoes fall a certain way, I'm going to need you, and I'm always just say, cool. I mean, I'm here, I love playing, and I like playing with people I've not played with at this stage of the game. Like I had a session a couple of weeks ago, just a one afternoon thing here in Nashville. And, if I walk into a room with new people and play something, that's always just thrilling for me. It's still, just playing, just being in a room, making music with people. That's great. I'm happy to take whatever calls come in, and when I can get Trigger Hippie back up and going, we'll do it.
I remember you played me when I saw you, believe it or not, 2 years ago. I was in Nashville, and we had lunch that day when Rick Moranis did something at Harry McCarthy's place. Yeah. Yep. And you played me some of the stuff, and really great. So that record's out now. I need to buy that record.
I'm surprised I didn't send you one. Wow. That's not cool.
I'll buy it. I'm going to buy it. Yeah. Cause you'd played me some demos, and there was a really cool song on there that you said was sort of inspired by a drummer friend of ours. So I don't know if that made it on the record or not, but.
Oh, that's on the record. Oh, me like a one-armed man trying to sound like Steve Gadd. Oh, that's on the record.
So it was so great. It was, I remember listening going,
it's the poor man's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover beat. Yeah, let's just call it what it is.
It's not the poor. I remember that. I remember it was really cool. So, and by the way, Todd Trent says hello.
Todd Trent.
Yeah, Todd Trent's watching and he says hello.
Master of the universe.
Yeah.
Love you, Todd. It's been far too long, sir.
He's a good man, that Todd Trent.
He's a very good man.
Yeah, he is. So Steve, so I'm glad you mentioned, I'm glad you had that question, because I wanted to talk about, at least make sure we talked about Trigger Hippie, and see if there's any other little things that I want to touch on here. We're getting sort of into the past the hour mark, so I don't want to hold you up all day here. We talked about the book a little bit. Or a lot of bit.
Well, I'm a Leo. Let's see, what else can I tell you about myself? That's it. That's all I got, John. Just,
Yeah.
think of me in August.
And that's plenty. Let me tell you that in itself and in all your life's work is plenty. Yeah. The Stereophonics too. I was just going to talk about some other bands that you played with, and
Mhm.
probably most people know the history that you left the Black Crowes at a point in the around 2000 or 2001,
The
maybe.
Black Crowes folded up shop at the end of 2001.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one who said like, "Hey, Aura, I'm out of here," but it was done for all. I mean, if you'd asked the members of the Black Crowes in 2001, that was the end. And then so in 2003, my friends Stereophonics, a Welsh band, I was living in LA then, and they were on the West Coast, and their drummer Stuart Cable, who's a dear friend of mine, had a health issue pop up, and I filled in. They called, like, literally said, "Can you play the Fillmore in San Francisco tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure,"
Yeah.
And they just put out a new record, but I had a copy of it, so I was like, "Yeah, just send me a set list. I'll see you tomorrow." And so that was a great case of winging it for just nothing but fun. And
Yeah.
then a couple of days later, they played actually back in LA, and I did that gig too. And that was it. It was like, fill in for these two shows. Thanks. We all had a laugh. And then Stewart's issue wasn't quite handled, and they said, "Well, can you do 4 more gigs?" And I said, "Sure." And then there was a break, and then suddenly Stewart left the band, and then it was like, "Can you come on tour?" And
Yeah.
this whole thing where I was going to fly to San Francisco for a gig on a Sunday night turned into a 10-month tour, which was incredibly rewarding for me. I learned a whole lot just being on. I'd just done the Black Crowes for so long. That was the only band I had from 87 to 2001. It
Yeah.
was all Black Crowes. And then after about a year sitting at home, I'm in a different band and seeing how they operated, and just the perspective I had on, okay, what parts of that life are really weird and what parts were weird because it was the Black Crowes. It's like a lot of it everybody's experiencing, but it really helped me get a great clarity on, well, this can actually just be a blast. Like, this is really kind of fun, when it's not your band.
Yeah.
When someone's arguing and you just walk in and drop a one-liner and leave, and no one's mad at you for not weighing in, and it's great. It's like, man, this is pretty cool. Like, if I'm gonna be in an uncomfortable situation in a weird room, it's great that it's happening in Barcelona and it doesn't impact my life. All right,
Yeah.
and but it was great, and it was an important tour for the band, I think, because they just lost a founding member, and it was good that I was there because I was able. I'm a solid player. The shows didn't suffer, and I was an older guy and able to I think I just provided them with a little bit of a steadying presence when they really needed one, and we talked a lot during that tour about me staying on, and the singer of the band, Kelly Jones, had been very good friends, and he was always, I could tell he was, by the time it ended, he was looking very differently. Like, he wanted to get in some loops and samples, and they were looking for a younger sound, and they were looking for a younger vibe. And I'm 10 years older than those guys, and they're just turning 30 and I'm 40, and it was kind of like, you're not the right guy for where we're going. Which I was like, yeah, I don't think I am. I mean, if they had continued more down like the rock and roll vein of the record I was touring on, but their next record was a whole nother planet from what would have made sense for me, but it was great. It was really fun. It's funny when people say like, "Oh man, you were in Stereophonics." I'm like, no, not really. I was on their tour and we had a great time, but that's as far as that went.
Well, I remember seeing you at the Orpheum, where I'd seen you many times before with the Black Crowes,
Okay.
and I was probably around 2004, if I had to
Yeah.
guess, or yeah, and I, honest to God, Steve, I remember having been with you many times previous, when maybe there was some instability in the Black Crowes. You would look like you were having the most fun, and you were
Yeah.
like so relaxed and so happy. We sat out in the bus, I think, before or after the show, and maybe had a beer,
Yeah.
like in that driveway in the Orpheum, and you were just so chill. It was like the old Steve of when I first met you, that just was.
Well, there was a good period of time in the 90s where the Black Crowes was just like a powder keg, and it wasn't that it's not like we didn't have a lot of really great moments, but there was never any idea of knowing when it was going to explode, and
Yeah.
and I just probably went too far in my efforts to make sure that none of my friends were collateral damage when it blew, because there were situations. I mean, Todd Trent's on this call, or he's watching this conversation. There was a gig in California where he could give you more details than me, but I remember like there was a whole thing was about to go down between the Black Crowes and another artist on the tour. And I remember Chris looking over and going, Todd, we're going. Are you coming with us? Like he was looking like, are you going to fight for us? And, it's just these moments where I'm like, here's this guy. He's at the time, Todd was the Ludwig dude, and he's a friend, and we're talking about something else. And you want him to go throw a punch at Lenny Kravitz's tour manager? What the hell's wrong with you? It's like, there was a lot of stories, like my family and a lot of my friends, everybody was around for some really bizarre things. And, I just go on and like, well, that was Tuesday, but it's weird because like 3 years later, someone goes, man, remember that time when, and I just think, oh, I was kind of hoping you'd forgotten about that, but no, not the case. So again, like the difference between that world and then going out with a bunch of friends where like, the guys at Stereophonics, like whatever the hardest day on that tour was, I didn't even notice. You know what I mean? It was like if somebody was having a bad day, it was like, hey, what's up, man? I never worried about someone getting an errant punch to the wrong face.
That's what you needed back then at that point in your life too, was
oh, it was great. It was, I had an absolute blast. I really did.
But I remember us going to some baseball games at Fenway Park with like the serious hookup on a couple of different occasions.
Oh yeah.
And that's for anybody, who's a baseball fan, or I should just say a sports fan. Steve has like hookups everywhere he goes because.
Well, I learned early on in the 90s, like, if I want to not see any member of the Black Crowes, there's a few places I can go. Golf course is a good one. That's going to give me a reason to be somewhere for 6 hours, and I will not encounter another member of the band. Baseball games, another good, long-lasting endeavor where I'm probably not going to bump into anybody in my band. You have to cultivate these safe spaces when one poorly thrown punch can end a tour. I can't break a finger. We got problems if I do.
No sirree. No.
Yeah.
No. Those were some fun times, though. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And so, and you have your radio show, your classic rock show that you're doing right now.
I do. Steve Gorman Rocks is 5 nights a week. It's on Westwood One Cumulus stations. It's about 50 stations coast to coast, different times depending on. It's 7 to midnight East Coast, 6 to 11 Central, and then out west, different stations played at different times. But yeah, it's a whole lot of music every night, 5 nights a week, and it's nothing like when I used to do sports talk radio. I don't do nearly as much talking, which is a good thing. I saw getting into radio, doing classic rock or doing rock radio for years. It was not something I could ever contemplate while I was still in the Black Crowes. That just would not have worked.
Yeah. And
so I went down the sports route, sports talk radio first, doing a really weird sports show where we talked a lot about music anyway. Right. But it was just sort of it was one of those things like, well, one of these days I'm going to get over and just start doing rock music. And so that started in the fall of 2019 as well. The Trigger Hippie record and my book and this radio show all hit within like a month of each other. And so in my head, they're all sort of connected. It's all the same time frame as when these three things started. But that's going great. And it's not that often you'll hear a song on there that you haven't already heard a lot of times. But if I was certainly guilty of forgetting how much I loved so much of this music from like right now, the sweet spot's late 70s to mid 80s.
Yeah.
And that's my middle school and high school years, man. It's like, I'm amazed at how often I find myself just like lost in some tune and the song ends. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to talk now. Oops. Yeah. It's great. I mean, it's like I used to say, I'm sitting around listening to music anyway. I might as well do a radio show too.
Yeah. Yeah, and make some scratch for doing it, And
it's certainly been a nothing short of a blessing to have that kind of a gig for the last year. I can tell you that. I don't take that for granted any day. For Trigger Hippie got shut down like everybody else, but again, I have this other thing I do. And here in Nashville, the number of, obviously we all know so many musicians who all of a sudden had to come up with a plan B real fast. And so I don't look at that radio show as anything but a lucky break. Trust me.
And yeah, no, that's amen to that, Steve. And so we're at 7 to midnight. Do you tape it during the day or do you do it live?
Yeah, no, we have to do it now. It was live initially, but since for the last year, everything is done. I do it late, in the afternoon. I do it as close to live as I can. And we can update during the show. Like there's, I record all of my segments, I'm on the mic for 8 minutes an hour tops. And I know what but we make adjustments. Like I'll get the first show, I'll get the first hour uploaded and my producer gets it into the system like right before the show starts. And then the next hour. And so it's as live as something like that can be given the circumstances that we're all in, which is we're not in a radio studio and we can't all be together, so, but like anything, there's breaking news, if something happens, I can still be talking about it that same hour, but it's not as live as it would have been normally.
Gotcha. Okay. And by the way, Tony Bronigal is watching and he said, golf kept me sane on the road for years and a tour of baseball stadiums.
Hey man. And it's always important to know a good, clean laundromat too, because you're never going to bump into your bandmates at a laundromat. It's a double bonus. You get clean clothes and you had some privacy.
That's right. Yeah.
Very important.
Laundry day.
There's a laundry place right off the Boston Common. Been there many times. I don't know what it's called, but I can take you right to it, man. You pick the moments of Zen where you can find them. And there's something about just watching your clothes tumble as they get dry, staring at it. It calms the soul.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you.
Life on the road.
Many a good lunch, you and I, when you'd be in town for a period of a couple of days, I'd always be able to, when you weren't on the golf course or weren't at a baseball game.
Well, the best thing, the thing I did always, the coolest thing about being a theater band is you're in the same town for a few days at a time. Like I'm not saying I wouldn't have wanted to get to where we were an arena band. That would have been great, but I always did enjoy, setting up camp for 3 or 4 days at a time instead of a different place every night. That was and so you do get to know a lot of, it's an amazing thing, like the number of coffee shops and the number of record stores and the number of things in all these various cities. I've never been there on my own time, but you feel like pretty connected to a lot of places pretty quick.
Yeah, I'll bet. And Scott Pistol Crockett was asking, and we know the answer to this, was Mark Ford still in the Black Crowes during your tour of duty?
Yeah. Well, I was there for the entirety of his tour of duty. His 2 tours. Yes. And if he was ever there, then I was there as well.
Right. A fine guitar player.
He most certainly is.
One of the finest I've seen.
He was the cherry on top. We had a really, really good rock and roll band ready to roll. And then when he joined, it was that missing element that completed the whole thing for that run in the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Incalculable contributions that man made to our music.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, we're approaching the 90-minute mark. You've been so generous with your time. Is there anything else you want to?
That explains why I'm just crawling out of my skin, John.
I thought you were going to say why you're so hungry, or
no. Man, I'm good. I'm here to serve you, brother. Wow, if you're done, I'm done. That's how this works.
I'm not. We're about halfway through, in fact, as far as I'm concerned. Let me see if there's any questions. People are always typing things and I don't see them till later, and I kick myself because there's sometimes some really good questions. So give me just a second here, Steve, if you would. And
I can do that.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Let's see. Are there any questions before we Charlie Drayton? Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And Jeremy and Steve are still here. Steve White and Tony.
What a Charlie Drayton, man. What a lovely gentleman and what a badass. I just have goosebumps hearing his name. Hey, Charlie.
I know.
It's been far too long.
Yeah, what a gentleman, what a musician. My old buddy Jerry Donegan from Zildjian, who you've met a time or
Yep.
two, says, hope you are well."
As far as I know, Jerry,
All right.
best I can do.
Well, I probably have missed some really good questions, folks, and I
Quite all right, man.
have.
Quite all right. Let's see. Here's the answers to a few questions you didn't ask. The 80s, I was all about the Lakers, not the Celtics. Oh yeah, 5 rings to 3. I take Magic over Bird 5 days, 7 days a week at all times. But that said, I was heartbroken when Len Bias passed. I was looking forward to that rivalry continuing. I didn't admit Jordan was the best basketball player ever until the 2000s. I just couldn't give it up over Magic, but I finally have acquiesced. And I still support, for no logical reason left on earth, the Arsenal Football Club.
Where do you put Michael Jordan and LeBron James in terms of?
Well, I mean, I don't like to compare eras, John, for a million reasons, because I will overthink this in a second. When you just do the blink test, it's MJ, but LeBron is going to retire with his own lane. He'll be the leading scorer in NBA history when it's all said and done. He will have been to far more final series than Jordan did. And, LeBron James has taken 2 teams to the NBA finals where the guys he was playing with, it was like you, me, and Steve and Jeremy was the other starting, the other 4 starters. Like the 2000 Cavaliers literally was LeBron James and nobody else. And he took them to the finals. Yeah. And he's also going to play until he's 40. And he's also, there's just a million ways to look at it. But what Jordan accomplished and how he did it, you still got to give him the, we're splitting hairs.
I knew I would get a great answer from you on that, a perfect answer.
Yeah, I know that I'd much rather, I think that off the court, you'd probably have a more enjoyable conversation with LeBron James, because Michael Jordan is, as we all know after watching the documentary, kind of competitive and kind of crazy still. So, I give LeBron props for, being able, at least putting on a better front of being like a normal dude when he wants to.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, man. That was an amazing documentary.
It was great. It was fantastic.
Well, Dave Phillips, Dave Phillips is asking, I don't know if you know Dave, he's in the UK as well and works for, Dave, I believe you're still working for Gretsch as artist, or DW Gretsch in the UK, but he's asking if you're going to be on the Black Crowes tour when it starts this year. And
I will not be.
You will not.
I will not be within 1 million miles of that tour. I have not been, in my mind, the Black Crowes ended for me in February of 2014. Very, very comprehensively ended back then. So it's a long time. I mean, the last tour was 2013. So it's a pretty good ways in the rearview mirror for me.
Yep. And Dave, not to be a pitch man here, but I strongly urge you to get this book if you haven't already, because it'll fill in a lot of the blanks. It'll
it'll do that.
It'll definitely help you, understand the thinking there. So, but Steve, what we've done here, it's pretty funny. I have a couple of old friends watching my friend Gary Ballard, fine drummer here in Boston. He's saying, "Come on, Johnny, come on, Bird kicked Lakers' butt." You started the rivalry all over again here, the Celtic Laker.
Sorry, man. The numbers don't lie. It's what it was.
I know. And have they now tied the Celtics with 17 championships?
Well, I will say this: I'm no longer a Lakers fan. I left them in the late '90s, but I believe they have. Yeah.
I think they have.
I believe they have.
When we had 16 and they had like 12, it seemed like they'd never catch us because neither team was winning championship. Man, I
got to the Boston Garden once, the real one, in '93. It was the only time I ever, and it was against the Bulls. I saw Jordan in the Boston Garden in '93, and that was pretty special. I mean, like, I grew up hating the Celtics. I spent my life and I walked into the Boston Garden, and it was like oh my God, I'm here. Like, I'd rooted against that team but I was just in awe the whole time, because I'm well aware of all the greatness that building contained, historically speaking. And, I'm looking for all the dead spots. I'm waiting to see if I can find them. And just that organ nothing else. You know,
Oh
it was
yeah.
like going to a game from the 50s. It was incredible.
But didn't you play there? Didn't the Black Crows play before it became the New Garden in like 95?
No,
No,
sir. Never played the Garden.
never played the Garden. Why did I think you
We
did?
did the Orpheum a million times, and we would go do, you know, the Great Woods, whatever that was called at the time. It's funny, you could always tell when a musician first hit the road because they still call amphitheaters by the first name they ever knew it
Yeah.
as.
Yeah.
Everybody does that. But no, we never played the Garden. We did the Opera House once, like in 2008. That was kind of
I was there.
shockingly beautiful place. Like I'd walked by
They
it a
had just
billion times.
I think they had just redone it or something because it was.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
nice.
And I think you played Worcester a few times, right? I saw you with
The Centrum, yeah.
Jimmy
We did
Page.
that with Jimmy, with Paige.
Yeah, that's where I
And
saw
then we did it some other time too. I don't know, man. We were in Boston a lot. Played the old Channel back in the day a few times too.
Yeah. And
Never
maybe,
played the Rat. I wanted to play the Rat, and we never got to.
I think by the time you guys arrived,
Yeah.
I think the Rat was gone. But maybe
Yep.
Lupo's in Rhode Island. Is
Oh
that-
yeah, we played
Yeah.
Lupos, yeah, a few times.
I saw you in a few different joints.
And then there was a place called the Living Room in Providence. I think that was the first place we ever played there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another place, and I the last thing that just jogged my memory was another place in Worcester. I saw you in '93. It wasn't the Centrum. It was like a theater type venue.
Okay.
Other people might know the name of it, but anyway.
Yeah, Gutter Ball opened for us that night. They were great. Gutter Ball. I know what you're talking about. I
Springtime.
remember that. Yeah. That was that tour. Yeah, we did. It was probably, yeah, because we did Boston in the summer before, but then we did Worcester like in the spring. Same tour.
Yeah.
But it was like 6 or 7 months later. Yeah.
It was like general seating, and they had chairs set up, but of course everybody was standing, and everybody's taller than 5'6", so I had to stand on a chair to watch you. Didn't make.
I appreciate you know, the effort you put in, you know, just to make sure you could see me. And I'm back there on the floor. I'm not doing you any favors. Didn't even have a riser.
Sorry, it was worth it, Steve. It was worth it.
It always was, Johnny. Thank you, brother.
All right, buddy. This has been so great. Don't go away, Steve. I'm gonna end the stream and say goodbye to the folks, and then I'll join you in the little waiting room there. But
All right.
But
Well,
everybody,
I'll say goodbye to the folks too, and
Yes.
and Charlie and Steve and Jeremy and anyone else, Todd, that I know personally. It's lovely to know you were here, and I really do look forward to you know, the world coming back, because it's been way too long for all of us. Cheers.
Yeah. Amen. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Tune in next week. I'm going to have, actually, sorry, really quickly, I'll say this Thursday, I'm going to have Rob Wallace of Hudson Music at 2 p.m. on Thursday, the 11th. Next Saturday, Steve White, 1 p.m. Eastern time, will join me. So thanks for watching, everybody. Big hand for Steve Gorman. Hip, hip, hooray. Steve, you're the best. And I'll see you in 1 second.